El Kentaro, welcome to the SAINTCON hallway.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate being here.
So this is your first time to SAINTCON?
Yeah, it is.
And what did you think it was going to be, a Utah security conference? And then what was the reality? Like, what was the expectations?
All right, so...
You could be honest, by the way.
Right, no, my coming to SAINTCON has been a decade in the making. Every year for the last decade, people have kept talking about SAINTCON. You got to come to SAINTCON. And I wanted to come here, but the problem was that it always ran exactly the same week as I had my own conference back in Japan. So I was like, yeah, I can't make it. Like, I think the first I heard about SAINTCON was, I don't know, almost 13 years ago. And I'm like, well, that sounds awesome because I've never been to Utah. So last year I retired from organizing my own conference. This year opened up. I was gracious enough to be invited by the committee. They're like, hey, can you come out? I'm like, oh, I would love to. I'm on a plane right now. So I came here and it blew my mind. So honestly, I thought it was smaller. I thought it was going to be a local conference. You know, I've been to a couple of them. There's like one hall where there's vendors and there's some community stuff. And there's going to be maybe one track of talks, maybe a workshop area. But man, the size just blew me away, and the vibrance, and you know, there's things that I haven't seen in any other village or other conference here that I was just like. And then I walk around and I see like, oh hey, there's Iceman, or hey, there's Grifter, there's Darkman, there's like all my friends are here. I'm like, oh man, I've been missing out for the last decade. So
we've been missing out for the last decade.
I don't know about that, but yeah.
The name of your con was
CodeBlue.
CodeBlue.
It's still going on. I'm just retired as an organizer.
How did that start?
So that started out of a need because, in a weird sense, Japan didn't have a conference for a long time because there were some incidents in the earlier days that, a lot of the researchers just kind of ducked underground for a while. And a lot of people, who I knew from, being involved in different conferences, they were like, hey, when is there a con in Japan? I'm like, I'm not starting a con. Because I knew how hard it was organizing one. So hats off to
It is real work.
It is a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's very rewarding. I'm sure you feel that way too. But
after it's up and running and going, yeah. Before you're like, is it worth it?
I always say, if you have a chance, get involved in volunteering or organizing, or being a leader of some part of a conference, because it gives you an insight into how hard to organize a conference is, but at the same time how rewarding it can be, and how many new people you'll meet over the years you're involved in, right?
I love that forced interaction.
Right. So a lot of people that me and my co-organizers, because we all went to all these various conferences, knew. They were always like, hey, you guys should have a conference in Japan. And I was like, I'm not doing that. And then one of our organizers, Kana, one day is like, I'm starting a conference and you're staffing it. I'm like, all right. And that was 10 years ago. And initially it was maybe 200-300 people. Now it's grown to a couple thousand.
Wow.
It's the largest security conference in Japan right now.
It's legit.
And it's kind of funny because me and Grifter, we met when Black Hat was still happening in Japan, and we were running tape on the ground, cables, giving out badges. We were ground ops. And then 10 years after, 10 years of my conference, he keynoted my last conference. So me and Grifter were just laughing about it. It was like we started it like putting cables and tables in rooms, and now you're keynoting the conference that I'm organizing. Right. It's just like it came full circle, and yeah, I mean, so there was that, and I'm glad that part of my life is over now. I'm grateful for the opportunities that it gave me, but now I have the freedom to go visit all these other conferences that I've been wanting to go. Because, despite what people believe, putting up a conference isn't like 3 months ahead of the conference. It's like a year-long commitment.
So much work.
Right? Multi-year sometimes for some events. So, I've come to the point of my career that I want to reach out and enable others to enjoy what I've enjoyed over the last decade.
Right.
So, I've talked to other people and it's like, look, all I need is, an invitation and I'll be there, So here
That's
I
awesome.
am after decades.
We're glad you came.
No, I'm super happy I made it out here.
Your handle, El Kentaro,
Yeah.
was this earned, given, self-given, other?
It's self-earned partially. So for the longest time, I have a very unique last name, Japanese last name. And it's very similar to a very popular name. So a lot of people would mistake it for the more popular name. And so I just kind of got rid of it because it was never correct. So
Right.
I just went around.
They're gonna butcher it anyway.
Yeah, so I just went around calling myself Kentaro. And then people were like, hey, do you know Kentaro in Tokyo? So I became the Kentaro in Tokyo. And then there was a Japanese wrestler that I was a big fan of, El Samurai, this Japanese wrestler, masked wrestler. And one year in 2014, I commented on my friend's blog as El Kentaro, and that's just kind of stuck ever since.
Love
Yeah, it fitted my character, and also L as in large because I was a big, heavier set guy back then. I was a big guy in Japan. Here I'm small, but
Welcome to America.
yeah. So it kind of stuck there. And there's a lot of references, cultural references that if you're of my age, that just makes you chuckle. So it kind of just stuck. So I became El Kentaro.
Over the last few days, I've heard some stories from you and mentions of In-N-Out, and they all just you drop a precursor sentence, and it's this giant story of a thing, and I'm like, I want to know more about that. But can we start a little bit at the beginning? What got you into information security?
So the funny thing about that is I'm not in information security. I'm a translator. My clients are now in information security, but they're not always were. Before this, I spent a decade in advertising. But I knew Japanese, I knew English, and I have a theater production background from college. So when
you should have been hooking up these cameras and microphones.
Yeah, so when Black Hat came to Japan, they were looking for some people to run ground ops for the conference. And we had a mutual friend, and he's like, hey, Kentaro, can you help us out? And I'm like, yeah, I can help you out. So I started running ground ops, and that's how I met Grifter and old Jeff and Ping and all the other old timers, Travis and Dominic and whatnot. This is like 2004, so it is a long time ago. But I was working in the advertising agency. I spent most of my professional life working in the advertising world, promotion for clients, working with clients. Project designing. I'm not a designer, so I'm the glue that holds the design team to the client, kind of thing, right? So so I'm not in information security, which so I don't do IR, I don't do threat hunting, I don't do.
But you're making ESP32 boards that back channel freak. You're definitely a hacker.
Yeah. So that's my claim, right? That. The funny thing is, once I started interacting with the hacker community, I realized whatever I was doing back then was actually hacking.
Right.
But I didn't know that was the word. Right. And then once I started getting involved in that, I was like, oh, there are other people like me who like to tinker and do things and take things apart and build things and whatnot. So I never knew I was a hacker until I met the hacker community. And I was like, oh, there are other people like me out there.
Right.
So I always say I'm a hacker, but I'm not an infosec professional.
Got it.
Because that's not what I do for a living. So.
If somebody wants to approach you and have a chat with you, but maybe they don't know what else is in common to approach you about, clearly Wi-Fi is a bucket that you have and own, and information security things, even though we'll say hacker things.
Right.
What's something else that you're interested in, or you have a project you're working on, you're excited about?
Oh, I love stories. I think of myself as a storyteller. The reason why I've been more outgoing and giving talks, which as a translator, I spent the last decade and a half or so, my job is basically pretending to tell the other person what the other person said. So I was never comfortable with talking about myself. But I realized that part of me also wants to be the storyteller. So, I'm interested in other people's stories, right? I'm interested in interesting things that I have no idea about. So that's, my friends who are, die-hard IR people, they tell me stories about, wow, that's really cool. Reverse engineers tell me things about how to reverse engineer a binary, and I'm like, all right, I have no use for it now, but maybe, 3 years from now, there might be a time where I need one. I need that knowledge, right? So I'm interested in any conversation. And, the more personal the story is, the more enjoyment I get out of it, I think.
So just come up and tell you a story?
Yeah, so I often say, because I have a hard time memorizing people's name and faces, handles are a little bit easier because there's so many Neils, there's so many Russes, there's so many Brians, Davids.
Right.
I often ask them for a handle and then to tell me a story, because then I'll have a better hook for their name, face, and the story. Like if you come up to me and say, hi, I'm Ed, I follow you on Instagram, I'm like, oh, thanks, Ed.
Right.
And then 3 minutes later, some other Ed comes up and says, I follow you on Instagram. I'm like, this is hard.
Ed squared.
Right. So if they come up and like, hey, I'm Ed, I follow you on Instagram, and this is my board that I designed, or, I really like the thing that you built, and, I tried to build my own. Or, there was this one time I found a backdoor into a vending machine, or, I was on assignment and I got arrested because I robbed the wrong bank, like.
Right.
Any story like that, if you have and everybody does have a story. I don't believe that there's any story that is not worth telling. So any story is fine. But I like hearing stories about other people, their lives.
Should we try this with you now for the people watching?
Like, yeah.
You're El Kentaro. What's your story?
So I'm El Kentaro. I'm Japanese by blood, but I grew up in Europe. I lived in Kansas for 7 years. So I've been around, the globe. I found my friends or my crew once I knew that what I was doing was hacking, and it liberated me. Part of my talk here at SAINTCON is the makings of me as a personal story through my builds. So I'm trying to tell a story of what inspired, how I got to the gadgets that I'm known for. And every of these gadgets has a backstory that I can tell. So I'll try to go through that in my talk. But it's more of a personal journey of me explaining my process and how making actually has saved my life. Because I realized a lot of bad choices I made in life is because I was mentally bored. And I want to share my story so that somebody who is struggling or somebody who feels lost can go, oh, if he can do it, then I can do it. Because that's basically how I think of myself, right? It's like people, I hate it when people come up to me and say, oh, master, or like, you're the grandest. I'm like, I'm not. I mean, I stand on the shoulder of giants, and I'm like a peg, in that storyline. But it's, for me, building and making is a very personal journey, and it's the same with my work. As much as I believe in work-life balance, I also believe you have to be vested personally somewhat into what you're doing for it to be more motivating or engaging for you to have joy out of it, right? So that's basically my talk going to be. It's not going to be, I don't have any cool 0 days to drop. I don't have a CVE. I don't have any career advice. This is going to be a personal story about me, my builds, and my journey. So hope you like it.
Thank you for coming to Utah. Thank you for sharing your story with us.
Knock on wood as it works tomorrow.
We look forward to your prezzo tomorrow.
Yeah.
And hope you have a wonderful time here in Utah, and we appreciate you coming out.
I fell in love with this conference. If you're watching, come out here.
Thank you for joining me in the SAINTCON hallway, El Kentaro.
Thank you very much.